Welcome back to the U.S. Navy History Podcast. I am Dale, and I am joined by the very weird, very silly Christoph. Hey, buddy.
Hey, I have been called both those things. Actually, all three. Weird, funny, and Christoph. So, yes, thank you, Dale. It's good to be here.
All right, so today we are going to start on a whole brand new campaign, but we're still in the American Revolutionary War. We're probably going to still be in the American Revolutionary War for a little while longer. So, you ready to get underway?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right. So, Philadelphia. So, following George William Howey's successful capture of New York City and George Washington's successful battles at Trenton and Princeton, the two armies settled into a pretty much stalemate. Do you know why?
I'm going to guess weather.
Exactly. Winter. Winter is here. Not much goes on during winter. So this was early 1777. They did, have little skirmishes, but nothing major. And the British Army did continue to occupy the outposts at New Brunswick and Perth Amboy in New Jersey. General Howey had a proposal to George Germain. He was the British civilian official responsible for the conduct of war. He was like, let's do an expedition in 1777, this brand new year. Expedition was to capture Philadelphia. This was the seat of the Second Continental Congress. And Germain was like, you know what, dude? Like it. But you cannot have as many men as you want.
Hmm.
He also approved plans by John Burgoyne for an expedition to, quote unquote, force his way to Albany from Montreal.
Is there a lot of
So,
in between Albany and Montreal?
I mean, what I could tell you is modernly, it is about nowadays you could just take 87 from one city to the next.
Yeah, that really would have aided our enemies more than anything. It's a good thing we didn't have the road system we have now then.
Yeah. It is probably from Montreal to New York is about 223 miles.
There are some mountains, I guess, between them, so that would make it tricky.
Yes. And, nowadays a border.
Right, that's true.
So
Yeah, okay. I could see him having to force his way, quote unquote. Please continue with the story, Dale.
I will. Thank you
Oh,
for your permission.
well, more of an insistence. Like, I'm just kidding. You're the captain. I'm not. Whenever you feel like it, man, I'm gonna just sit here at rest.
So Jermaine did give his permission to Howie with the expectation that he would assist Burgoyne with his push into uh, Albany. This was to create a junction at Albany between Burgoyne's troops and what Howie would have from New York. So Howie decided by early April that he did not want to take his army overland to Philadelphia through New Jersey because he would have to go across the Delaware and people would be shooting at him while doing it. And he was like, and I would also need to make boats. So instead, he told Germain on April 2nd, which pretty much, canceled any plans he would be able to help with the whole Albany situation, that he was going to take his army by sea to Philadelphia.
Hmm.
So, Washington, he realized that Howe, quote, certainly ought in good policy to endeavor to cooperate with General Burgoyne. And he was actually very confused on why he didn't do it. Washington was very puzzled over this, and actually a lot of historians are really puzzled as well.
The more I think about it, it's odd that he made that choice. But yeah, if you'd like to have a discussion about it on Discord, we have a Discord. Look at the show notes. Join us. Talk about this weird stuff. Okay. Sorry, Dale. Go ahead.
Well, what the historians have pretty much come to a conclusion of is that Germain was just very, very bad at his job
Oh,
because he didn't coordinate the two campaigns very.
I see. Okay. I'm hoping historians don't look back on me and find the same thing.
Well, which battle have you led?
No, no, no. No, it doesn't have to be, well, more, I'm bad at my job. They'll go back and say, oh, that Christoph. Yeesh.
Well, tell you what, make a time machine, go into the future, and see what your standing is.
Okay. That sounds like a reasonable request. I will get started on that after this show.
All right. I want to see your plans on my desk by end of day.
Oh, well, they'll be really rough. But yes, okay.
All right. So after Howie capture captures New York and Washington, he does his whole retreat across the Delaware. He wrote to Germain proposing to, and well, really an elaborate set of different campaigns. These included operations to gain control of the Hudson River, to expand operations from the base at Newport in Rhode Island, and to take the Continental Congress in Philadelphia.
It's pretty bold objectives. I think, yes, let's see how that turns out.
Yeah. Howe wrote that he was, quote, persuaded the principal army should act offensively against Philadelphia, where the enemy's chief strength lies. Germain, he was like, yeah, your plan is really well thought out. But, dude, I don't have that many men to give you. But, after the setbacks in New Jersey, Howe, in mid-January 1777, he proposed operations still against Philadelphia, which included an overland expedition and a sea-based attack.
Right?
He was like, if we do this two-pronged thing against these rebel elements, that we could have a very decisive victory over those American jerks.
He's going to regret calling us jerks, let me tell you.
Oh, I was actually just, making it more PG.
Oh, I see. Well, he's going to regret calling us what he said, pincer attack or not.
So the plan continued developing, and Howe was actually, his guys were seen constructing pontoon bridges. That's how far into the plan they've gotten.
That's kind of cool.
And by mid-May, Howe was like, you know what, guys, all that work you just did, no, we're not going to do that anymore.
Oh, man.
He was like, you know what, guys, we're going to invade Pennsylvania by sea, which means we're going to have to probably abandon the Jerseys.
Mm.
Sorry, guys.
Well, that stinks. For the pontoon builders in particular.
Yeah. And, part of his decision not to help out Bjorn was, a bit because of his own ego as well, more
Right.
than likely, because Bjorn would receive credit for a successful campaign, even if Howie had to go help him.
Gosh, that's so.
And
Put the mission
yeah,
first. Ego's next or last.
so he's like, but if I take Philadelphia, that's all mine.
That's true. That's true.
Quote from a historian named John Alden. He says, quote, "It is likely that Howie was as jealous of Bjorn as Bjorn was of him,
Hmm.
and that he was not eager to do anything which might assist his junior up the ladder of military renown."
I don't know. That's human nature, so I shouldn't be so shocked. But it is. I mean, I'm glad they failed in that way. That probably helped us quite a bit. But it is kind of discouraging to see that kind of animosity.
That stuff still exists today.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah. So Howie writes to Bjorn on July 17th, quote, "My intention is for Pennsylvania, where I expect to meet Washington. But if he goes to the northward, contrary to my expectations, and you can keep him at bay, be assured I shall soon be after him to relieve you." Then he gets on a boat and sails.
All right.
So Washington's army had been encamped mostly in Morristown, although there was a small forward base at Bound Brook, which was just a couple of miles from the nearest British outposts. There was a small kind of retaliation measure against all these skirmishes. General Charles Cornwallis, he did a raid against the position in April, in which he almost captured the outpost's commander,
Whoa.
a guy named Benjamin Lincoln. So, in response to this, Washington moved his army forward and fortified a position at Middlebrook in the Watchung Mountains. And this more than likely had a commanding view of the British land routes towards Philadelphia. Probably good that Howie was like, I'm going to go take a boat.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is interesting. I'm kind of enjoying the unfolding of this, I don't know, bit of history. It's
Mm.
a lot of head scratchers and, well, anyway, yes, Benjamin Lincoln. Like, we can't go forward unless we address the name also, because I thought that was the first Lincoln I know from history was Abraham, and now we've got another Lincoln. I wonder if
Yeah.
they're related.
Let's see. So I do not believe that he is. Yeah. His ancestors were among the first to settle in, which is in the province of Massachusetts Bay. His father was Colonel Benjamin Lincoln. So there are places the places named Lincoln in the American South tend to be named after Benjamin Lincoln instead of Abraham Lincoln.
That makes sense. That's quite a legacy.
Yeah. So, but I do not think they were related.
Okay.
It's just one of those happy accidents.
I'm glad we explored it.
It did something that people are still scratching their heads over today. He moved a sizable army to Somerset Courthouse, which was south of New Brunswick. If he performed this move as a feint, it was to draw Washington out from his position. But it didn't work because Washington was like, I ain't falling for that. We're sitting right here. Washington had intelligence that Howe had not brought the necessary equipment for either bringing or constructing watercraft. So this move seemed unlikely to him to be a move towards the Delaware River. But when Howe did withdraw his army back to Perth Amboy, Washington did follow him.
Okay. That is so fascinating that, as a matter of course, they had equipment to build watercraft to ford rivers and whatnot. I just think about how long that's a skill that I am unsure if our current army possesses, or maybe they just have the rigid inflatable boats instead in their place, so they're more portable.
Oh, our modern military wouldn't have to construct anything, they just bring it in.
I see.
They have mobile construction battalions.
Wow.
That the Navy has those. Those are the Seabees.
You're right.
And the Seabees will build like forward operating bases and things of that nature. But something like going over a river, no, they bring in one of those bridge trucks.
Oh, right. I've seen those. Those are awesome.
Yeah.
It's quite a difference. I mean, it's just interesting how, 200 years makes.
Yeah. So while Washington was following him, Howe did send Cornwallis in a strike to try to cut Washington off from the high ground. But this failed during the Battle of Short Hills. So Howe was like, okay, guys, let's just get back to Perth Amboy.
All right.
And he put them on transports and they sailed out of New York. They went towards Philadelphia. And that left Washington scratching his head going, where are they going? Because he sees all these guys just get on boats and leave. You got to be thinking, you got to think that he's thinking, did I just win?
Right. Just a shocking victory to the victor.
Is the war over? Did I win? But then he's thinking again, this might be a feint, another feint. He was like, maybe he's trying to sail his army up Hudson and join with Burgoyne. So Washington decided, I'm just going to stay around here and see what's going on. And when he received word that Howe's fleet had reached the mouth of the Delaware, he was like, oh, maybe I got to go defend Philadelphia.
Right.
When he found out that the fleet did enter the Delaware and instead continued south, he started scratching his head again. Where's he going? Charleston? Maybe? So he started considering having to move north to assist in the defense of the Hudson. And then he heard that the fleet had entered Chesapeake Bay. So he's like, yep, Philadelphia. So he starts moving his troops south to start preparing the city's defenses. General John Sullivan, he commanded the armies that were on Staten Island, or at least near Staten Island. He, in order to capitalize on what they thought were weaknesses in the British position, after Howie left, tried to raid them.
Oh,
And that didn't do so good for them. That was the Battle of Staten Island.
got it.
Yeah, that was a failure. So General Howie, he lands about 15,000 troops at the northern end of Chesapeake Bay, about 55 miles southwest of Philadelphia. General Washington, he put 11,000 men between Howie and Philadelphia, but he got outflanked and he got driven back during the Battle of Brandywine. This was on September 11th of 1777, and he had over 1,000 casualties, while the British lost about 500.
Yeah, it's not good.
No, that was not a even loss. So when this happened, Continental Congress was like, well, guys, guess we're moving again.
Right.
And they first went to Lancaster. Then they were like, no, let's go to York in Pennsylvania. So that's where they ended up setting up shop. So the Americans and the British, they maneuvered around to each other west of Philadelphia. For the next few days, then they had different small battles, like the Battle of the Clouds and also the Paoli Massacre, as it is kind of called. And on September 26th, Howie finally was able to outmaneuver Washington. And he marched into Philadelphia unopposed.
Wow.
So the capture of this city did not end the war as the British thought it would.
Right. Capture the capital, you win, right? That's the way it's always been.
Actually, yeah. In the 18th century warfare, normally the side that captured the other city's capital won the war.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. But nope, it was going to keep going for another 6 years because war is now becoming unconventional.
Right.
War has evolved.
Yeah, it's more like guidelines, not really rules.
Yeah.
Just the look on the British's face, collective, their one collective face, when they're like, "Yes, we've got Philadelphia, we've achieved victory," and they're like, "No, no, we're still shooting at you." The look like, what do you mean? That would have been delightful to see in person.
Yeah, there's just the confusion like, this is not how war works. Guess what? It does now.
Mm-hmm.
So, after taking Philadelphia, the British garrisoned about 9,000 troops in Germantown, which is 5 miles north of Philadelphia. Washington attacked Germantown on October 4th, but was unsuccessful. And he retreated to pretty much wait and watch for a British counterattack. While this is happening, the British did secure the Delaware River by taking Forts Mifflin and Mercer in November. And in early December, Washington was able to repel a series of attacks, probing attacks by General Howie. And this was the Battle of White Marsh. So this is when, Washington's problems really started to stack up. Because, it's not just the British he's having problems with. Politicians and officers were becoming unhappy with his performance. And they secretly discussed taking him out of his position.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, Washington, he hears about this behind the scenes discussions, and he is offended. So he marches right into Congress, and he's like, what the heck, dude?
And,
yeah, he was like, huh?
I'm wondering what their response was, because, yeah, that's exactly how I would feel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's taking it a whole completely different way. Everybody else is like whisper, 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 secret, secret, secret. And he's like head held high. Stop it.
Right.
But and his supporters rallied behind him, and everything just went away.
Nice.
I mean, not the British, but
Well, everything within their control, I guess.
right.
That's funny.
So Washington and his army, they encamp at Valley Forge in December of 1777, about 20 miles away from good old Philadelphia. And this is where they stayed for about 6 months. Over the winter, around 2,500 men died from disease and exposure, which was out of about 10,000.
Yeah.
But they did finally emerge from Valley Forge in pretty good shape, thanks to a training program supervised by a guy named Baron von Steuben.
Ooh, what an awesome name.
He was a German that came over, and he set up what the military was based on at the time. So the US military at that time was based on the German military.
I guess Germany wasn't around then, so I guess Prussian maybe?
I think Germany was brand new,
Oh, yep.
actually.
I think you're right.
But here's the thing. The American army is still based off that original German design.
It seems to be working so far.
So yeah, our US army is German. No.
Well, we've got some roots.
On the British side, there was some shakeups. General Howe quit.
Oh,
He's like, I'm done. And he's replaced by Lieutenant General Sir Henry Clinton.
that's right.
France joined the war, and this forced a change in the British war strategy. And Clinton was ordered by the government to get the heck out of Philadelphia and defend New York City. Because guess what? The French Navy is coming.
Aha. Yes, that's right. They've finally chosen to throw their lot in with us.
hmm The British sent out a peace commission, which was headed by the Earl of Carlisle. And they made offers in June of 1778 as Clinton was preparing to get out of Philly. And of course, Congress rejected these. And you know why?
No, I don't.
Because independence wasn't offered.
That's right. That is the sticking point, and I think that's where they and Benedict Arnold were at odds. Like they're like, "Hey, we have everything we want," and they're like, "No, we don't have independence." And it's like, "Well, that's not what we were fighting for originally." It's like, "Well, we are now," and
Yeah. Yeah. At this time, independence was the final objective.
mhm.
They were like, well, we already had a couple of peace summits, and you guys were like, it's unreasonable. So guess what? Now we just want independence.
Right.
So as the British were beginning their withdrawal, Washington sent Lafayette out on a reconnaissance mission. And he narrowly escapes a British ambush. This was the Battle of Baron Hill.
Okay.
So Clinton, he ships most of his loyalists and most of his heavy equipment by sea to New York. And he got out of Philadelphia on June 18th. Washington and his army shadowed Clinton and his army. And Washington was able to force a battle at Monmouth Courthouse on June 28th. And this was the last major battle in the North.
That's surprising. I guess maybe not really now that I think about it.
So by July, Clinton was in New York City and Washington was again at White Plains. And both armies were right back to where they had started 2 years
It's
earlier.
like, yes, this sounds extremely familiar.
Yeah. Hey, I remember these trench works.
Oh, hey, they still fit. Good construction, Al.
So just to end this whole Philadelphia campaign, shortly before the British got to New York, a French fleet arrives outside New York Harbor. And this led to a flurry of action by both sides. The French and Americans decided to make an attempt on the British garrison at Newport, Rhode Island. This first attempt at coordination between two allied armies was a huge failure.
Hmm.
Yeah, they did not play well together. So, under orders from London, Clinton reallocated some of his troops to the West Indies and began a program of raiding coastal communities from Chesapeake to Massachusetts. Around New York, the armies of Clinton and Washington watched each other, and they had little bitty skirmishes here and there. And then a couple of major battles, like in 1779, the Battle of Stony Point, and the 1780 Battle of Connecticut Farms. Clinton did consider making new attacks on Philadelphia, but they never got out of the planning stations or the planning stages. The British also began a wider frontier war organized out of Quebec City, which used Loyalist and Native American allies. And the British and French forces engaged each other in the West Indies and in India beginning in 1778. And when Spain entered the war in 1779.
Wow.
So this is looking like a world war.
It does a bit.
Yeah, a bit. In 1780, the British began a southern strategy to regain control of the rebelling colonies by capturing Charleston, South Carolina. This would ultimately fail at Yorktown.
Ah.
So that is the Philadelphia campaign. What are your thoughts
I
on
thought
on it?
so it seems pretty disorganized from the British perspective. I mean, they did okay. They did capture Philadelphia, but there was a lot of wrangling with Washington, and they couldn't quite. I think they would have been a lot more decisive had they worked together. But that's not to say they weren't successful in their own way in the end. It just highlights a lot of the challenges that the Americans had early on. Like, even with an enemy that wasn't communicating and wasn't playing well together, they still weren't taking advantage of that as well as they could have because they just, whether it's resources or men or whatever the case may be, I mean, a lot of credit to Washington. It's interesting. Just this every facet of the war, you're like, oh, Saratoga, what a great victory that was. Surely America's gonna win soon. And then this happens, and then it's tough. And a lot of people I don't think realize the length of this conflict. It was a very long war. And
The scope.
yeah, just India being involved, that's not something that I've ever heard outside of this podcast. And so it's just fascinating how influential even then, well, number one, that the British Empire was, but that America's rebellion was to the world.
Yeah. It was very influential to everybody.
Yeah.
And we'll be getting into the India campaign later.
Nice. I am excited to learn more about it.
Yes. So I think we're going to There is one naval battle linked to this, but I think we're going to save that for the next episode.
Oh, all right. Cool.
So, what we're going to do is we're going to finish out with what we like to do by honoring one of our fallen angels in partnership with herocards.us. So, this week we are going to honor Private First Class Mac Lamel France Jr. His hometown was Danridge, Tennessee. He served with the U.S. Army, Company A, 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment, 1st Cavalry Division. He received a Purple Heart. His date of sacrifice was May 6th, 1966, killed in action in Dien Bien Province, South Vietnam. He was 18. So Mac France Jr. grew up in the small eastern Tennessee town of Dandridge along the shores of Douglas Lake. His father served as an Army private in World War II. Mac Jr. was the only son born to Mac Sr. in Lagatha, France. There were 5 daughters in the France family. Barbara, Judy, Brendan, Marjorie, and Drusilla died as infants. Mac France Jr. entered service in October 1964, an infantryman in the U.S. Army. He was assigned to Company A, 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment, 1st Cavalry Division. In 1966, America's commitment of troops to the Vietnam War increased to 400,000. Private First Class France's 1st Cavalry Division was sent to Binh Dinh, I'm sure that's incorrect, but province in South Vietnam on the coast of the South China Sea. In January of 1966, the U.S. launched Operation Masher, which was later renamed Operation White Wing, against enemy forces on the Bong Son Plains. The search and destroy operation was the largest cooperation between American, South Vietnamese, and Korean forces to that point in the war. While the operation was successful after its conclusion in March 1966, some areas of the region were gradually retaken by communist forces. On May 6, 1966, Private First Class Mac L. France Jr. was killed by gunfire in Dien Bien Province. He was 18 years old. PFC France Jr. is honored at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., where his name is inscribed on panel 07E, line 33. So, Private First Class Mac Lamel France Jr., thank you.
Thank you.
All right, XO, take us out.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us in listening to the Philadelphia campaign. I hope you learned something. I know I did. If you would like to get in touch with us, because maybe we missed a detail that you would have preferred to have in this podcast, or maybe you have further questions, there's a couple ways to contact us. You can email us. The email address is usnavyhistorypodcast@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can tweet or post at us on X Twitter. The handle is @USNHistoryPod. We also have a Discord server, so you can jump in and shout at us, or speak to us properly as you would want to establish a friendship or something like. I don't know. Anyway, you can join us. You can talk. The link is on the show notes. We're also on YouTube. You can check us out there, not visually, but audio-wise. You can hear us.
Audibly.
It was right there. Yes. So, and feel free to rate us on iTunes or YouTube or wherever you get finer podcasts. I think that's everything. Anything else, Captain?
We just want to wish you guys fair winds and following seas. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.